Hello guys. Close your eyes and imagine a cold starlit night in the far north over 1,000 years ago. The air is crisp and the world is hushed. In the distance, gentle waves lap against a fjord's rocky shore. A small cluster of wooden houses with turf-thatched roofs nestles at the edge of dark pine woods. From their chimneys, thin threads of smoke rise up to meet the starry sky. In one of these humble homes, a warm fire crackles softly in the hearth. The orange glow flickers on the log walls and rough-hewn beams, playing shadows across hand-carved wooden benches and tables. A family is gathered quietly around the fire after a long day's work. A mother mends a torn woolen tunic by lamplight. A father carefully sharpens a scythe for tomorrow's chores. Children, their eyes heavy with sleep, lean against their grandparents, listening to the comforting sounds of the night. Outside, a wind whistles low under the eaves, but inside there is peace. In the far distance, a lone wolf howls from the pine forest, a long, hollow sound that drifts through the frosty air. One of the children, half asleep, burrows closer to her grandmother at that eerie cry, but the old woman just pats the little one's back in comfort. It's a familiar song of the night, nothing to fear behind sturdy walls and under the gods' watch. The family dog lifts his head at the sound, ears pricked for a moment, then recognizing no immediate threat, he settles his muzzle back on his paws with a sigh. The wild world outside can sing its winter songs. Here inside is a circle of warmth and safety. The scent of wood smoke and dried herbs hangs gently in the air. The family speaks in hushed tones, if at all, enjoying a well-earned rest. In this quiet moment, they might share a story or simply reflect on the day. It is a moment much like any other, yet within their hearts lives a rich tapestry of beliefs and hopes that guide them through life's many uncertainties. If you find comfort in these quiet journeys through the past, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. It's always so interesting to see how far and wide these quiet moments reach. Now imagine the thoughts of those Norse villagers as they sit in the gentle glow of the fire. They live in a world alive with unseen forces and ancient promises. Every breath of wind, every flicker of the stars above holds meaning in their eyes. They believe that their lives are woven into a great cosmic story, one that began long before them and will continue long after. It is a story of gods and giants, of fires and icy seas, of a vast tree that holds together the realms of existence. It is also the story of an end that will someday come. Tonight, however, they do not tremble in fear. They accept this fate as one accepts that winter will follow autumn. They carry the knowledge quietly, as one carries an old song in the back of the mind. They gaze into the flames and remember that the world itself is a fragile circle held between fire and ice. In their understanding, the earth is flat like a disc, and all around it lies a vast ocean. Far beyond the coasts, hidden beneath the endless ocean, lies the great Midgard serpent. So immense is this creature, Jormungandr, that it encircles the whole world and grasps its own tail in its jaws. Normally it slumbers in the deeps, coiled around all lands, but if ever it shifts or thrashes, the ripples can shake the seas and even the earth itself. In the face of a sudden squall on the water, or the faint trembling of an earthquake underfoot, a Norse person might quietly think, perhaps the great serpent has stirred in its sleep. Somewhere beyond that ocean's horizon crouch forces of chaos, the land of giants and untamed powers. At the center of the world stands a great tree, Yggdrasil, the tree of life. They cannot see it with their eyes, but they feel its presence in every forest grove and ancient oak. This immense tree's roots drink from sacred wells, and its branches hold up the sky. It connects all things, the realm of gods high above, the realm of humans in the middle, and the mysteries of the underworld below. They say strange creatures live upon Yggdrasil. A dragon or serpent named Nidhogr gnaws at its roots far below, while high above, an eagle perches in the upper branches. A little squirrel called Ratatosk scurries up and down the trunk, ferrying messages and perhaps insults between the eagle and the dragon, a reminder that even in myth, gossip and mischief find a place. 4 deer nibble at the tree's tender shoots, and a goat named Heidrun feeds on its leaves, her udder providing endless mead for the warriors in Odin's hall. These fanciful details are shared with smiles around the fire. They populate the cosmic tree with life, making it not an abstract symbol, but a vibrant living universe in itself. In the minds of these Norse folk, every part of their daily life is quietly woven into this cosmic landscape. When they draw water from a well at morning's light, they might think of the well of Erd beneath the world tree, where fate itself is said to spring forth. When they see a mighty old ash or oak tree on their farm, they regard it with a touch of reverence, a reflection of Yggdrasil in their own yard, a living pillar that whispers of unseen realms. The night sky above is not just a random scattering of stars, it is the dome of the giant Ymir's skull, placed by the gods at the dawn of time. The clouds drifting across the face of the moon are thought to be the brains of that ancient giant, forever swirling in the heavens. Such images live softly in their imagination, not disturbing their chores but enriching them like a gentle background melody to all their labors. To the Norse, the world is alive with meaning. The wind in the trees might carry the breath of the gods. A rumble of thunder is not merely weather, it is Thor, the mighty protector, riding across the sky in his goat-drawn chariot, his hammer causing the skies to roar. When a rainbow arcs after a storm, they see in it the glimmer of Bifrost, the shimmering bridge that the gods use to travel between their realm and the world of humans. Imagine a farmer pausing in his field, leaning on his hoe, smiling faintly as he spots a rainbow after a summer rain. In that colorful band of light, he quietly greets a sign of hope, believing that the gods are near and watching. Every dawn and dusk holds a quiet magic. As the sun rises, they know a divine horse draws it across the sky, chased by a hungry wolf. And each sunset reminds them that the chase is never ending. One day, in the far-off future, that wolf will catch the sun and devour it, but not today. Today the sun merely slips below the horizon, bathing the clouds in reds and golds. The people enjoy its last gentle light without panic. They know this is the natural cycle, day to night, summer to winter, life to death. It has happened countless times before, and will happen countless times again. Why should the final sunset be any different? It will come in its own time, as fate decrees. For now, the turning of sun and moon is simply a beautiful, dependable rhythm that lulls them into a sense of order and continuity. Just as Norse cosmology divides existence into many realms, it also teaches a sense of boundary between safety and the unknown. The people of the Viking Age see their world as layered with meaning, but they also cherish the small circle of home as their refuge. Just as the cosmos was divided between the haven of Midgard and the dangerous outer realms, so too did people view their immediate surroundings. The home and farm were their Inangard, the inside, orderly world. Within the perimeter of the farm's fence, by the light of the hearth, there was safety, fellowship, and the rule of law and custom. Outside in the Utengard, the open woods, moors, and mountains, the normal rules thinned and the unknown reigned. A traveler stepping beyond the village at night entered a realm where elves might dance in the meadow, where trolls or outlaws could lurk in the crags, or where the very land itself, untamed by plow or prayer, held its ancient, unpredictable power. Because of this view, hospitality was more than kindness. It was almost sacred. To invite someone into your home was to extend to them the protection of your Inangard. Harm them there, or break the peace of the hall with violence or betrayal, and you committed a grave offense, not just socially, but cosmically. You mimicked the giants trying to wreak havoc in the god's sanctuary. Thus, when weary strangers knocked at the door, they were greeted with warmth, food, and a spot by the fire. The Norse believed that any guest could be Odin himself in disguise, testing their generosity. An old tale in the Havamal even warns of this. But even if not a god, a guest was under the household's wing. In that circle of lamplight, sharing salt and bread, the chaos of the outside world was kept at bay. When the family closed the doors at night, they knew that they had done their part to keep their innengard intact. The goats penned, the embers banked, the threshold blessed or marked to ward off roaming spirits. Beyond their gate, wolves might prowl and bitter winds might blow, but inside, order and warmth prevailed. In each modest homestead, they created a microcosm of the great cosmic balance. Light amidst darkness, friendship against wildness, a little haven in the vastness. It is a touching thought that in every cottage and hall, no matter how rough the timber or how flickering the candle, there lived a determination to uphold that haven. Night after night, generation after generation, this is how they quietly pushed back against the void, not with grand edifices or unshakable walls, but with simple acts of care, a roof well thatched, a fire tended, a prayer whispered, a guest welcomed. In preserving their innengard, they felt they were helping the gods themselves hold the line until the dawn. Fate, to these people, is as real as the soil underfoot. They call it Urd, or Urlog, the weave of destiny laid down for each being. In their lore, beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, 3 mysterious women tend a sacred well. These are the Norns, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, their names meaning what once was, what is, and what will be. Each day, the Norns carve marks into the trunk of the great tree, or twist the threads of an endless tapestry, setting the course of every life and event. Not even the gods can sway their design, for the power of fate is stronger than any god or giant. Our humble family by the fire might not speak of fate often, but they feel it always. When a child is born, they believe the Norns have already decided that child's path, how long they will live, what joys and sorrows they will know. If misfortune strikes, a poor harvest or an illness, they might sigh and say, "So it was meant to be," not out of despair, but out of acceptance that some threads are beyond their control. In the language of the Norse, there is a saying, "Weird but full arid." Fate is inexorable. Fighting against it is like rowing against a strong current. One can struggle, but ultimately the current carries you where it wills. Yet this acceptance of fate is not defeatist. It does not rob them of spirit. Rather, it imbues even small acts with purpose. Since they cannot change their fate, they seek to meet it well. A farmer facing a coming storm cannot stop the storm, but he can secure his home, shelter his animals, and then weather it with courage. A warrior on the eve of battle believes that his death is already decided or not. Thus he fights fiercely and without fear, because either he will survive as fate allows, or he will fall and fulfill his destiny. In a way, this brings a calm to their hearts, a sense that whatever happens is part of a larger pattern woven by wise if mysterious hands. By the firelight, an elderly grandfather might tell his wide-eyed grandchild about the Norns. Perhaps he describes them as he learned in an old poem. 3 maidens seated at the base of the cosmic tree, spinning threads and carving runes of fate. He might gently remind the child that even the great god Odin once sought wisdom from Osiris and learned that not even he could escape what was foretold. The child might then whisper, asking if even Odin must obey the Norns. The grandfather would nod slowly, gazing into the embers. Yes, Even the All-Father must bow to the decree of fate. It is a humbling thought, but also a unifying one. Gods and humans alike share the same fate of eventual endings. In that knowledge there is a quiet comfort. No one is truly alone in the flow of time, not even the gods themselves. And so, in the tapestry of fate, the end of the world has a name, Ragnarok. This word, spoken seldom in everyday conversation, yet ever present in the lore, signifies the twilight of the gods, the final destiny of the cosmos. The villagers by the fire know of this prophecy. Perhaps they heard it from a traveling storyteller or in the verses of an ancient song. It is said that at some unknown time far in the future, a series of events will unfold that will unmake the world they know. They envision it like a distant storm on the horizon of time. First will come a devastating winter called Fimble Winter, 3 winters back to back without the respite of summer. Snow will drift over every field, even in what should be the growing season. Ice will grip the land, and bitter winds will howl without end. People will struggle for survival, and many will perish in the cold and darkness. The bonds of society will fray. It is foretold that humans, desperate and afraid, might even fight one another over the last scraps of food as that endless winter rages. After this long darkness, the very fabric of order will tear. The rooster will crow to signal the dawn of the final battle, not the rooster of a farmhouse, but mythical cocks whose crowing awakens giants and gods alike. The great wolf Fenrir, which has long been chained by the gods, will break loose from his bonds. His enormous jaws will gape open, reaching from the ground to the sky, devouring everything in his path. Another wolf will catch the sun and swallow it, and its brother will eat the moon, plunging the world into a blood-dark gloom. The stars will vanish from the heavens. The earth itself will shudder with earthquakes as the serpent Jormungandr, that vast dragon which encircles the realm of humans, thrashes upward onto land, poisoning the sky and sea with its venom. In the midst of this chaos, the ship made of dead men's nails, Naglfar, will set sail from the land of giants, carrying the enemies of the gods across the boiling sea toward the final battlefield. It is on a plain called Vigrid that the last fight will occur. Odin and the gods will ride out to meet the forces of chaos. The giants, Fenrir the wolf, Jormungandr the serpent, and the traitor god Loki, leading the hostile horde. The villagers have heard how each deity will meet their doom. Odin, the All-Father, will fight Fenrir with all his might, but the wolf will overpower and consume him. Thor, the Thunderer, will slay the great serpent, but only manage to stagger 9 steps before the serpent's poison brings him low. Freyr, god of fertility and sun, will fall to the fire giant Surt, because he gave away his sword for the sake of love long ago. Brave Tyr will face the hound Garm, and they will kill one another. One by one, the shining gods who protected the world will perish, and the forces of destruction will triumph, at least for a moment. The final act of Ragnarok is a conflagration. Surt, the giant with a flaming sword, will fling fire in every direction. The whole world, the forests and farms, the mountains and rivers, will be engulfed in flames. What the fire does not consume, the ocean will. The seas will rise up, flooding over the scorched land. In those last moments, the villagers imagine an eerie silence as the earth sinks into the dark waters and all that once was solid drifts away. Such an ending is undeniably tragic and terrifying. To picture the cozy world of Midgard reduced to ash and then to nothingness can send a chill down anyone's spine. And yet, our Norse family does not scream in horror when they hear these tales. They might grow quiet and thoughtful, perhaps holding their children a bit closer as the story is told, but they accept that this is the doom woven into creation itself. Evil is the decree of the Norns, one old poem laments, acknowledging that fate can be cruel. The end of the world is the ultimate confirmation that nothing, not even the gods, can escape destiny. But here is the gentle undercurrent of hope that even the Ragnarok prophecy carries. An end is also a kind of beginning. In some versions of the tale, after the world is drowned and darkness covers all, a new earth slowly rises from the sea, green and fresh. The sun, devoured by the wolf, is not gone forever, for a daughter of the sun will appear, a new sun to shine upon the reborn world. Two humans who hid themselves in a sacred tree during the Great Fire emerge after the cataclysm. They are called Life and Lifthrasir, their names simply meaning life and lover of life. Hungry and cold, they step onto the dew-covered grass of a new dawn and find that the fields yield abundantly without even being sown. The surviving young gods, children of the fallen, reunite on Itavel, the golden field, and together with these two humble humans, they begin the world anew. Indeed, bards and wise folk preserved this cosmic tale in poems like the Völuspá, the prophecy of the seeress, reciting it in firelit halls. In mesmerizing verses, the seeress narrates to Odin the story of creation and the foretelling of Ragnarok and what comes after. You can imagine the hush among listeners as her voice paints the dimming sun, the shaking earth, the fall of gods, and then the serene vision of a new green earth rising. Through such poetry, even those who could not read could envision the entire cycle from fiery end to fresh beginning. It was a way of sharing in the distant fate without panic, almost as if by telling the story, they exerted a gentle, accepting power over it. Knowing this, the Norse people understand that Ragnarok is not a final, eternal night, but a turning of a great cycle. Yes, it is an ending of all they hold dear. Yet tucked within that ending is the seed of a new start. As surely as spring follows the hardest winter, renewal follows destruction. Perhaps this notion helps them sleep at night, after hearing a bedtime tale of Ragnarok by the fire. A child might fall asleep imagining not just the frightening fire and flood, but also the tender image of life and life's lover, stepping out into warm sunlight after the storm. In that thought is comfort. Even if the worst were to happen, it will not be the end of everything. Something pure and good will sprout from the wreckage, like a green shoot from a burnt log. How does one live one's life, knowing that such an end awaits the world? The Norse answer is subtle but profound. One lives with quiet courage and steadfastness. Instead of falling into despair or nihilism, they choose to uphold their values even more firmly. In their tales, even knowing the battle at Ragnarok will be lost, the gods and heroes do not hesitate to meet it head-on. They find dignity in the striving itself. This attitude trickles down into the mortal realm. A Viking warrior, for instance, cherishes the idea of dying bravely with a weapon in hand. Why? Because according to belief, those who fall with valor are chosen by Odin's Valkyries to join the host of Valhalla. There, in Odin's great hall, the chosen dead, the Einherjar, spend their days honing their combat skills, and their nights feasting on mead and roast boar. They are not idle revelers. They are Odin's army in training. These warriors believe they will fight alongside the gods at Ragnarok. It is a bittersweet honor. They know it will be a doomed fight. Yet there is no greater pride than to stand with the All-Father in that final hour. So when a warrior strides into battle in early 900, wearing a wolfskin or a coat of mail, he carries in his heart a nugget of fearless acceptance. If he dies today, it is not the end, but the beginning of his service to the gods. If he lives, it is because fate has more tasks for him yet. Either outcome is acceptable. In one old saga, a hero thrown into a pit of serpents used his final moments not to cry out in terror, but to sing a proud death song, describing the feasts he would soon share with Odin in Valhalla. Such was the ethos, meeting death not just with stoicism, but even with a certain grim cheer, as if to rob it of its sting. This fearless stance This willingness to face doom with sword raised and a steady gaze is the very essence of Norse bravery. But bravery is not only for warriors on a battlefield. Consider the farmer and his family, who may never brandish a sword at an enemy. Their courage is of a quieter kind, tested not by war, but by life's everyday hardships. They face long, dark winters when food stores run low, when each day they must shovel snow to free their barn door and break ice for the animals to drink. When a blizzard howls outside for days, burying the world in white, they light what lamps they have and huddle together by the hearth. The wind may batter the door and frost creep over the window slits, but inside they maintain a routine, feeding the fire, telling stories, knitting nets, or carving wood by dim light to pass the time. They know the storm will spend itself eventually. When the snow finally stops, they wordlessly put on their cloaks and begin digging out their animals and paths, faces stung by the icy air, muscles aching, but hearts relieved that they've weathered yet another trial. This annual dance with winter strengthens their resolve. Each winter survived is proof that even the harshest times can be endured and will give way to spring. They weather storms at sea when fathers and sons go out in fishing boats, praying to the wind and wave to be merciful. They endure illness and loss, the death of infants or the passing of an aged parent. Through each personal trial, the same choice presents itself, to despair or to press on with hope, and time and again they choose to press on. In their own way, they too are preparing for Ragnarok, not by swinging an axe at a giant, but by building a resilience of spirit. In a small coastal hamlet, a fisherman's widow might raise her children alone after her husband is taken by a sudden squall on the sea. She mourns him deeply, but she does not curse the gods. She tends the goats and mends the nets, teaching her son the skills his father would have taught. On cold evenings, she pours a little of their thin broth onto the fire as an offering, a humble gesture asking the divine to watch over her family. Each day she carries on is an act of quiet heroism, a refusal to let grief or fear defeat her. She may believe that her husband's spirit feasts in Valhalla now, chosen for his courage on the waves, and that thought gives her solace and pride. In her steadfast endurance, she mirrors the brave who face the world's end, determined to meet whatever comes with grace and honor. In Norse culture, this resolve to face the inevitable with dignity is a form of spiritual preparation. They cannot stop Ragnarok from coming, but they can strive to be worthy of a good end, whenever and however their own lives conclude. An old saying from their wisdom poem Havamal reminds them, cattle die, kinsmen die, and so one dies oneself, but one thing never dies, the fame of a dead man's deeds. In other words, since death, and by extension the end of all things, is unavoidable, what matters is how one lives and how one meets that end. Honor and reputation, being remembered for courage, generosity, and integrity, those are the immortelles that survive even after death cuts life's thread. For the Norse, this was a kind of answer to Ragnarok. Even if the world ends, the story of how we lived might still echo in the halls of memory or in the next world. So they live in such a way that their name might be spoken with respect long after they are gone. That is their quiet defiance of oblivion. Even around the hearth on an ordinary night, this ethos is present. Perhaps the father of the family offers a simple toast from his wooden cup before bed, murmuring a dedication to Thor or to the ancestors, a promise to do right by his kin, to be courageous and fair. The children, observing, learn that courage is not only for heroes and sagas, but for every person in their own sphere. They see it in their mother, who calmly tends a difficult birth of a calf in the freezing night, in their grandfather, who at his age greets each morning with a prayer of thanks and a determination to make the day useful despite aching bones. In countless unspoken ways, Norse people build inner strength to face any darkness, be it a personal trial or the twilight of the world itself. This isn't to say they never felt fear or sorrow. A mother alone at night might still jump at an unexpected noise, or a farmer might feel a knot of worry when an illness spread among the cattle. They were human, and anxiety visited them as it does us all. The difference lay in how they carried it, quietly, without letting it break their spirit. When frightened, they sought solace in a familiar ritual, whispering a prayer while stirring the stew, or carving a small protective mark on the door. Then they continued with their tasks. In that persistence, fear found little room to take root. By acknowledging life's uncertainties, but refusing to be paralyzed by them, they transformed fear into caution, and caution into patience. What remained was a steady resolve underlaid with faith that, come what may, they would cope as their ancestors had coped before them. Aside from grand prophecies, the Norse looked for smaller signs in the everyday world to guide them. Life was full of omens for those with the wisdom to read them. The flight of birds across a gray sky at dawn, the sudden appearance of a fox near the homestead, or peculiar shapes in the embers of the hearth fire. Any of these could carry a message or warning. They lived close to nature and believed it whispered truths about things to come. If ravens, Odin's sacred birds, were seen circling overhead, a person might feel the Allfather's presence or take it as a favorable sign, since Odin's two ravens, Hugin and Munin, flew over the world to bring him news. To spot a pair of ravens heading in the direction of one's journey was quietly heartening, as if Odin himself watched over the traveler. Conversely, if an owl cried strangely in the night, or if the family dog suddenly howled for no apparent reason, they might grow uneasy. Was it just a wild creature's call? Or could it mean that a wandering spirit was near, or that something unfortunate was imminent? They did not panic at such signs, but they took note. A farmer might postpone a trip or a sale if the air felt ominous after a strange sign, preferring caution. The sky itself was a great canvas of omens. A blood-red sunset might be seen as a reminder of the blood that one day will stain the sky at Ragnarok, but it could also just foretell rough weather. A solar eclipse, when the sun briefly goes dark in daytime, would surely give them pause. In their mythic understanding, a giant wolf was forever chasing the sun and the moon. An eclipse might mean the wolf had nearly caught its prey. We can imagine on such an occasion the villagers standing outside in a hushed midday twilight, chickens confusedly returning to roost, the people banging pots or making loud noise to scare away the unseen wolf and encourage the sun's return. And what relief, what gentle gratitude, when the sun's light creeps back over the rim of the moon and the day is bright again. In their hearts they likely thanked Thor or Odin for helping fend off the devourer, even as they exchanged reassurances that it was over. Comets and shooting stars too would draw their wonder. A bright comet with a trailing tail appearing in the night could have been interpreted as a sign of significant change or a portent from the gods. Perhaps a skald in the hall would recall a verse about flaming swords in the sky, or dragons flying between worlds. The people might not know exactly what it foretold, but they would mark it in memory, connecting it with any notable events that followed: a birth, a death, the arrival of an important traveler, to puzzle out the meaning. Dreams were another realm of omens. In the stillness of night, the boundary between the mortal world and the spiritual world thinned. The Norse paid attention to dreams, believing that in sleep, one's soul could receive messages or wander beyond the body. Not every dream was meaningful. Trivial or nonsensical dreams were called dream nonsense and dismissed, but a vivid, strange dream could hold great weight. If a farmer dreamed of a great tree falling, he might wake troubled, wondering if it meant a family elder would pass away, the family tree losing a limb, or if some protective spirit had left. If a woman dreamed of a mighty wave washing over the farm, She might quietly prepare for a difficult challenge ahead, perhaps a literal storm or a metaphorical one. People often sought out the wisdom of the oldest members of the household or the community to interpret significant dreams. A wise grandmother or a visiting seer might decode symbols. A dream of wolves could hint at treachery or danger. A dream of clear running water might signify healing or good fortune. There are tales of powerful dreams recorded in lore. One old story speaks of a queen who dreamed of a tree growing from her bridal jewelry, spreading its branches over all the land, a dream which foretold the rise of her lineage and the greatness of her future son. Years later, that queen, named Ragnhild, saw her son, Harald Fairhair, unite Norway under his rule, and she remembered that red, green, and white tree from her youth that had reached over entire kingdoms. Even though such lofty dreams might belong to saga and legend, they illustrate how people trusted dreams as a medium through which fate whispered its intentions. Even the gods had such dreams. Baldra, for example, had his death foreshadowed to him in dreams before it occurred. And Odin himself sought the meaning of Baldra's nightmares by riding to Hel's realm to consult a dead seeress. These myths reinforce the belief that dreams could be windows into hidden truths. On other nights, dreams could provide a means of contact between living humans and otherworldly beings such as the dead, elves, land spirits, and deities. For example, an early settler of Iceland was said to have a dream in which a spirit offered him help. Soon after, an unusually fertile goat wandered into his herd, and that year his flocks prospered immensely. The line between dreaming and waking could blur in such tales, but to the Norse mind, it all fit in their enchanted view of reality. When someone felt in need of a significant dream to seek guidance or comfort, they might even try to induce it. Particular methods existed. One could sleep on a burial mound or under the open sky at a sacred site, actions believed to draw the spirits or the gods closer. A young man unsure of whether to venture on a voyage might spend a night alone on the grave of his grandfather, hoping that in his dreams his ancestor would offer counsel. Others might sleep with a token under their pillow, perhaps a runic inscription on a chip of wood or a blessed pendant to invite a vision or protect from nightmares. They did these things gently, with earnest hope. In the quiet of the night, they trusted that the veil between worlds might part just enough to give them a glimpse of what lay beyond their immediate sight. All these omens and portents did not make the Norse person fearful at every turn. Rather, they provided a language through which the people felt in touch with the flow of the cosmos. A sign, whether good or ill, was a chance to prepare or to hope, an indication that their lives were acknowledged by the wider weave of fate. It made them feel less alone in a vast, sometimes threatening universe. On a morning when a pair of ravens landed on the roof and croaked, a family might share a glance and a small smile, taking it as a blessing, and if at times the signs pointed toward trouble, they would tighten their resolve, perform a protective ritual, or seek advice from someone wise in the old ways. In listening to the world's subtle messages, they found a measure of guidance and comfort amidst uncertainty. For more explicit guidance than the hints offered by omens and dreams, the community sometimes turned to those believed to have the gift of prophecy. Among the Norse, the most renowned of seers were the Volar, wise women who practiced a form of Norse shamanism called scythe. A vulva was held in both awe and respect. She was often an older woman, traveling from farm to farm, especially during the winter months when people had time to gather and listen. Dressed in distinctive clothing adorned with beads, charms, and sometimes a tall headpiece, she carried a staff as a symbol of her power. Imagine a small farmstead in the deep of winter, snow piled high against the outer walls, and food growing scarce. The family there is anxious about whether spring will come late or early, whether their livestock will survive the cold. They send word to invite a vulva, who is known to be in the district. On the appointed evening, she arrives, and everyone in the household treats her with great honor. They prepare a special seat at the high end of the hall, covering it with soft cushions and the finest blankets they have. A hearty meal is cooked for her, perhaps a stew enriched with the hearts of their best lambs and a bowl of creamy milk porridge, foods believed to fortify her for the spiritual journey she will undertake. The family and even neighbors from nearby farms gather quietly in the hall, faces flickering in the fire and lamplight, anticipation hanging in the warm, smoky air. The vulva, the spa wife, as some call her, meaning prophecy woman, eats in silence, gathering her strength. When she is ready, she begins her ritual. The household provides what she needs. Often, that includes the presence of a young woman who knows the old songs. In this farmstead, the daughter of the family has a clear, sweet voice and has learned a series of strange ancient chants called Vardlokur, warding songs. At the vulva's nod, the room hushes except for the crackle of embers. The young woman begins to sing softly, an eerie lilting melody that weaves through the rafters. The language of the song is old and not fully understood by everyone present. It's a kind of invocation, calling spirits and opening the door between worlds. As the song sways and repeats, the vulva closes her eyes and rocks gently back and forth, one hand on her carved staff. Those watching might see the feathers and bones adorning her cloak trembling as if stirred by a breeze from elsewhere. In the quiet of their own breathing, the listeners feel the air change. Something unseen has entered their humble hall. Perhaps friendly ancestral spirits or guiding forces come to whisper to the vulva. She breathes deeply and falls into a trance, journeying in her mind beyond the confines of the room. The singing continues, keeping her spirit tethered to the living world even as it ventures out. After a time, it could be minutes or an hour, no one can tell in that enchanted atmosphere, the young woman's song gently ceases. Silence reigns, and then the vulva begins to speak. Her voice is different now, distant and resonant, as if another speaks through her. She tells them what she sees. Maybe she describes seeing the land spirit of that region, standing tall and reassuring them that spring will indeed come early and their herds will multiply. She might speak of a vision of full fishing nets in the summer, easing their worries of starvation. Or perhaps she carries a warning, a sickness seen creeping toward the community, advising them to prepare healing herbs and avoid certain risky travels. As she speaks, the people listen in rapt attention, hearts pounding softly with hope or solemn acceptance. When her prophecy is done, the vulva's voice falters and falls silent. She closes her mouth and is still for a long moment. Then, gradually, she seems to return to herself, her shoulders relaxing and her eyes focusing again on the faces around her. The tension in the hall eases. The farmer and his family exhale and move quietly to bring her a warm drink, perhaps ale or spiced mead, to help revive her after her exertions. They do not clamor or question her heavily. They respectfully take in all she has said, turning it over in their minds. There might be a few polite questions to clarify her visions, which she answers briefly if she can. That night, the household sleeps more peacefully than they have in weeks. The future, once a dark unknown, now feels charted in some small way. If good fortune was foretold, they rest easy with gratitude, careful not to disturb the favorable fate with foolish actions. If challenges were foreseen, they now feel equipped to face them, armed with the foreknowledge and any advice the vulva gave. In either case, there is comfort, the sense that the gods or spirits have acknowledged their plight and offered guidance. The vulva leaves the next day, continuing her circuit to other farms, leaving behind a community, reassured and bonded by the shared experience of touching the spiritual realm. Not every village had access to a Velva regularly. She might come infrequently, or there might be only one in a wide area. Thus, her visits were special occasions. In her absence, villagers still had their own ways of divining answers. Some farmers practiced simpler methods, such as casting lots, perhaps throwing chips of wood carved with runes onto a cloth and reading the pattern in which they fell. They might also observe the behavior of sacred animals. For instance, if they kept horses dedicated to the gods, the direction a horse wandered when let free could answer a yes or no question. These little folk divinations were done quietly, often privately, as a way to seek comfort from the unknown. Yet, in difficult times, nothing quite matched the collective solace of a Volva's prophecy. It was more than just answers. It was a communal spiritual experience. To sit together in the gloom of winter and hear a human voice speaking the will of unseen forces, this bound people together, affirming that they were part of a universe that cared enough to send signs. The future could be faced calmly when its outlines were drawn by prophecy. And even if Ragnarok itself loomed on the distant horizon, a community could find the will to persist through present troubles, one season at a time, with the guiding words of a seer lighting their way like a softly glowing lantern in the dark. Not all Norse attempts to influence fate or seek protection required the presence of a gifted seer. Many were woven seamlessly into daily life through symbols and small rituals. Central to this was the use of runes, the letters of their alphabet, which were more than mere writing. Each rune carried a sound, but also an inherent meaning and a little spark of power. The people carved runes onto wood, bone, or stone for all manner of purposes, often to invite good fortune or ward off harm. A merchant setting sail might carve the rune algies, shaped like a protective elk's antlers, onto his ship's prow or paint it onto his shield, believing it would guard him and his crew from treacherous waves and hostile encounters. A mother, worried for her child's health, might inscribe the rune on a small piece of antler and tuck it into the baby's swaddling, a subtle prayer for strength and vitality, for was linked to the primal strength of the aurochs, the wild ox. Farmers could scratch a few runes on their plow or the doorway of the barn to safeguard their livestock from disease and ensure the land's fertility. These carvings were done quietly, often accompanied by a whispered invocation. The act of carving itself was meditative, each cut of the knife into wood a deliberate act of will. They believed that carving a rune could enlist the essence of what that rune stood for. In a sense, it was a humble attempt to converse with the forces that shaped the world, asking for a bit of their favor. There is a gentle tale told of a time when runic knowledge was misused. A young farmhand, smitten by a local girl, tried to carve a love charm into a piece of whalebone to win her affection. Unskilled in the art, he copied some runes he had seen but did not understand. The girl soon fell ill with a strange sickness. Her family, desperate, called upon a traveler known for his wisdom in runes. When the traveler arrived, he discovered the concealed whalebone with its clumsy carvings under the girl's bed. Gently pulling it forth, he read the runes and shook his head. The runes were nonsense, set in no meaningful order, their muddled power causing the girl's malady. The wise traveler burned the bone charm in the hearth, wafting away its harmful spell. He then carved new runes on fresh wood, this time properly, words of healing and protection. He placed the wood under the girl's pillow. By dawn, her fever had broken and color returned to her cheeks. The traveler admonished the youth never to meddle with runes unless he learned their mysteries deeply. Stories like this circulated not as frightful supernatural fables, but as gentle lessons. Symbols have power, so one must use them with care and respect. Most people only knew a few simple runes and their uses, enough for the basics of protection and luck. Those truly skilled in runic magic were relatively few, perhaps special craftsmen or poets taught in the lore. Still, nearly every Norse person wore or carried some form of symbolic charm. The most common of these was the little amulet in the shape of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Archaeologists in later times would find many such hammer pendants in graves and settlement sites. To the people who wore them, it was a comforting weight against the chest, a sign that the thunder god's strength was near. In a world full of dangers, lightning, storms, evil spirits, and everyday perils, wearing the symbol of Thor was like carrying a shield of divine goodwill. Some historians think that as Christianity started spreading and people wore crosses, the old believers wore Thor's hammers in response, as a quiet declaration of loyalty to the old gods. But even before that, surely a blacksmith or a warrior heading out on a journey felt a bit braver with the hammer of Thor bouncing on his breast. And a housewife alone in the hut while the men were away might touch the charm at her neck and feel safer from trolls or ill luck in the night. Beyond jewelry, there were countless other folk practices. If a traveler was setting out on a long voyage, a friend might gift him a small talisman, perhaps a pouch of herbs or a carved bead, to keep in his pocket as a ward against accidents. At home, families sometimes placed protective tokens over doorways and entry points. It could be as simple as the carved face of a god, or a wooden stave marked with a few intersecting lines, a kind of rune stave to catch any wandering harmful spirit like a spider's web. When new buildings were raised, people might bury auspicious objects under the threshold or in the corners, a lucky horseshoe, a boar's tusk, or even a small animal sacrifice given back to the earth in exchange for the stability of the house. The natural world provided protective gifts too. The sea, for instance, offered walrus tusks and whale bones, which were sometimes carved into amulets. The forests gave rowan wood, which was considered especially potent against sorcery. A piece of rowan hung above a barn door was said to keep witches and ill-willed magic at bay. Women might weave small geometric symbols into clothing, hardly noticeable in the pattern, but put there deliberately to ward off the evil eye. Even the act of weaving and spinning thread had a magical resonance. After all, the Norns themselves were spinners of fate. A conscientious spinner might pause to say a short prayer or charm as she worked the loom, so that the thread of life for her loved ones would be strong and not easily broken. Fire and salt, simple elements of life, were also used as wards. When a baby was born, it was common to place a bit of salt on its tongue and a piece of iron, like a scissors or knife, under its cradle. Salt to purify and protect from malicious beings. Iron to scare away trolls and elves who were thought to dislike the metal. And particularly stormy nights, one might bank the hearth fire in a certain pattern, or keep a lamp burning through the dark hours as a beacon of safety, a signal to any roving spirit that this household was under the protection of friendly forces. These everyday magics were largely done in modesty and privacy. There was no boast or drama to them, a mother humming a lullaby imbued with an old prayer, a farmer arranging his tools in a blessed configuration before beginning the harvest, a sailor spilling a few drops of ale overboard for Ran, the sea goddess, before a voyage to earn her favor. By weaving these acts into their routines, the Norse people felt proactive in safeguarding their world. It was a way of saying, we know we are small under the sky, we know fate is mighty, but we will still light a candle against the dark, still draw a protective line in the sand. These small acts, repeated generation after generation, gave them comfort and a sense of agency. In a universe ruled by great cosmic events, it was in these intimate acts of faith and magic that they exercised their will to protect what they loved, quietly pushing back against chaos in the spaces of their own homes and villages. When death came, as eventually it did to every person, the Norse responded not with indifference, but with deep care and a sense of ritual purpose. A funeral was perhaps the most poignant of all their quiet preparations for eternity. They viewed a person's passing not as an abrupt end, but as a journey, one that required provision and guidance. How one was laid to rest would help determine their comfort and status in the realm beyond life. Picture a gentle spring morning in early 900. An old farmer who had seen some 60 summers has died after a brief illness during the winter. His family prepares to bury him on a grassy knoll overlooking the fields he tilled and the fjord where he fished. They wash his body with warm water scented by mountain herbs. They comb out his gray hair and beard and dress him in his best woolen tunic, dyed a soft blue and embroidered by his wife's own hand long ago. In his calloused hands, they place his favorite axe, not because he will need to cut wood in the afterlife, but because that axe was like an old friend, and it gives a sense of familiarity and readiness. They also set a humble wooden cup and a spoon at his side, so he may eat and drink wherever his spirit is bound. His eldest son tucks a few coins into a pouch on the belt. Even if the next world has no markets, the gesture feels right, an ancient custom perhaps harking back to times when such offerings were thought to pay passage or appease underworld guardians. If the family is of means, or the departed was greatly respected, they might have a small boat pulled onto the land to serve as a burial vessel. In some regions, a full ship burial could be arranged, the dead person placed in a real boat, along with treasures, weapons, and goods, then covered in earth to form a burial mound, or sent out to sea and set alight under the open sky. For our farmer, a simpler ceremony suffices. They have built a coffin-like frame of timber, and within it assembled many of his belongings. His farming tools, a well-worn sickle, a knife, a whetstone, are tucked near his feet, symbolizing his hard-working nature and ensuring he's equipped to farm the next world's fields should he wish. His riding horse, beloved and now gently sacrificed to accompany him, for in some areas it was the custom to send a horse with its master, lies respectfully beside the mound, or perhaps they bury the horse's bridle and saddle as a token instead, sparing the animal's life. They sprinkle a few seeds and a small bag of soil from his land into the grave as well, so that he carries a piece of home soil with him. Before sealing the grave, the family shares a quiet moment. The local chieftain or a respected elder might speak softly over the body, thanking the man for his contributions, how he was a fair neighbor, how he provided for his kin, how bravely he faced his final days. They invoke the gods gently, committing his spirit to the care of the goddess Hel, who welcomes the ordinary dead in her misty hall, or perhaps to Freyja or Odin if he was known for valor, for some believed that those who did not die in battle might still find their way to Freyja's field Folkvanger or other divine dwellings. Prayers are murmured that he join the ancestors and watch over his descendants. His wife, holding back tears, places a final gift, a silver arm ring he gave her in their youth, beside him, a token of love to accompany him. The grave is then closed, earth is heaped over the coffin timbers, the mound is raised, and they mark it with a simple carved post bearing his name, or some symbol of his clan. Perhaps they carve the sign of Thor's hammer on it, asking Thor to guard this resting place. Or they inscribe a short rune message, "Here lies Busakoth, a good father, may he know peace." Standing by the freshly made mound, the family feels grief, yes, but also a quiet assurance that they have done right by him. They have sent him off with honor and the things he might need. Not every funeral was so modest. For chieftains and legendary heroes, the send-off could be dramatic in its splendor, though still carried out with that same solemn dignity. Songs and sagas tell of ship burials, where a longboat itself became the coffin. The deceased would be placed aboard their dragon-proud ship, surrounded by treasures, weapons, and sometimes the bodies of sacrificed animals, even, according to some accounts, trusted servants or bondwomen who chose or were chosen to accompany their lord into the afterlife. Such ships might be buried under great earth mounds near the sea, or, in the most romantic tales, set adrift on the waters and put to flame with a burning arrow. One can picture the silhouette of a vessel on a fjord at dusk, its sails catching fire, crackling sparks rising to meet the first stars of evening. The watching community would stand in silence along the shore, their faces illuminated by the golden glow reflecting off the black water, until the ship carrying their beloved leader became a distant ember and finally sank beneath the waves. These grand rites were rare and reserved for the mighty, but they lived long in the collective memory. For generations after, locals would point to a grassy mound and say, "There lies so-and-so, with his ship and his riches, waiting in his barrow for the final battle." Or a skald entertaining in a hall might recount the scene of a fiery funeral ship, making his listeners' eyes glisten with pride and melancholy. Even those who never witnessed such a spectacle felt connected to it through these stories. It reinforced a comforting thought that the journey to the afterlife was not made in loneliness or darkness, but amid honor, light, and the guidance of one's dearest possessions and companions. In the twilight hours after the farmer's funeral, his family gathers in their hall for a simple funeral feast. It's not a wild or drunken affair, just a modest meal in his honor. They set aside a portion of each dish on a small plate, which they later leave at the mound, a practice to share the feast with his spirit. By the flickering fire, the son and daughters speak in turn, sharing gentle stories of their father, how he rescued a lamb in a snowstorm, or the funny song he used to sing while brewing ale. There is laughter through tears. This storytelling is itself a sacred act. It is how the dead remain alive in memory. As the night deepens, they feel his presence in the warmth of the fire and in the bonds between them. They know he is on his way to the halls of his forebears, where one day, far in the future, after the world's trials are over, they will reunite. With that faith, they can sleep that night with lighter hearts, believing that death is not a lonely void, but a doorway to another form of existence, one where, even at the end of time, family and honor will endure together. Life's year had its own cycle of endings and rebirths, and the Norse marked these with communal rituals that bound them to the cosmos. Perhaps the most cherished of these was the Yule celebration in the heart of winter. In the long dark nights around the solstice, when daylight was scarce and the cold most biting, families and friends would gather to chase away the gloom with light, warmth, and the promise of returning sun. Imagine a Norse hall in late December of early 900. Outside, the world is blanketed in snow and the rivers are frozen still. The sun barely peaks above the horizon for a few hours at midday, casting a blue twilight rather than full day. Yet inside the hall, there is an air of quiet cheer. Evergreen boughs, pine, fir, holly, adorn the walls and doorways. Their deep green, a reminder that not all life dies in winter. The scent of pine mingles with wood smoke. In the central hearth, a great oak log, perhaps a special one saved for this occasion, burns steadily, the Yule log that will be kept alight through the longest night, symbolizing the light of life persevering through darkness. Preparations for Yule began weeks before. Families brewed strong ale and mead, saving the best for this festival. They slaughtered a pig or goat, curing some of the meat and keeping fresh portions for the feast. This was both practical, to thin the herds before the hardest part of winter, and spiritual, an offering of life to appease the gods who governed the seasons. On Yule Eve, as darkness fell early, the community gathered. Neighbors who lived miles apart might trudge through snow to join a larger farmstead celebration, for it was a time to be together. They brought gifts of food, one family's store of apples, carefully preserved from autumn, another's cask of cloudberry wine, another's wheel of cheese. Placed together, these offerings created a richer feast than any single household could have managed, a shared abundance in the lean time of year. Before eating, there was the blot, the sacrifice and sacred offering. By torchlight just outside the hall, or perhaps in a nearby sacred grove of leafless oaks, the community lead a chosen farm animal, often a boar in Sweden or a goat in Norway, to be sacrificed. The local chieftain or Gothi priest might perform the act, thanking the animal for its gift of life and dedicating it to the gods. A portion of its blood was collected in a bowl and then sprinkled with fir sprigs upon the earth, upon the standing stones or wooden idols of the gods, and even lightly upon the foreheads of participants, a solemn blessing, returning vitality to the soil and people. Though this sounds grim to us, to them it was holy and respectful, done swiftly and with prayers. They believed the blood carried a life force that, offered to the divine, would help ensure the sun's return and the earth's fertility when spring came. After the rite, the mood grew lighter. Everyone filed back into the hall, where the smell of roasting meat soon filled the air. Children, eyes bright, helped set out wooden plates and fill jugs of ale. The roasted boar's head, bedecked perhaps with herbs or small candles, might be carried around the hall in a slow procession as the people touched their cups to it or placed a hand on the beast in a gesture of reverence. This animal's spirit was thanked and entreated to carry their wishes to Freyja, the god of harvest and fertility, to whom the boar was sacred. Then the feast began in earnest. By the fire's glow, they ate heartily. Meat, bread, dried fruits from far summer, nuts and cheeses, and whatever each family could contribute. It was a welcome break from the usual thin winter fare. Between courses, horns of ale and mead were raised for ritual toasts. The first toast, as was custom, was dedicated to Odin, or sometimes to Freyja, asking for peace and a fruitful new year. Till Arzok Friðar, they might quietly invoke, to a good year and peace. Another toast would be made to Thor, perhaps, for protection, and another to the ancestors who had passed on, the mini toast of remembrance. Each adult took a draught in turn, perhaps saying a few heartfelt words if they wished. There was no rowdy clamor, just a sincere communal moment as each person voiced hopes or blessings. One might whisper thanks for a son recovered from illness. Another might vow to mend quarrels with a neighbor. Another simply salutes to those not with us. We remember you. The children sipped watered ale or elderberry juice, imitating their elders with earnest solemnity, absorbing the sanctity of the moment. Later, once bellies were full and the initial rites observed, the mood could become more merry. Someone produces a harp or lyre, and soft music fills the hall. Old John, with his snowy beard, might be nudged to recite a favorite saga episode or a humorous skaldic verse. He stands, leaning on his cane, and in a sing-song cadence begins to tell of Thor's adventures in Jotunheim or a fragment of the creation story. He speaks not boisterously, but in a rhythmic, soothing tone, like a father telling a bedtime story to dozens of eager children. And indeed, the children sit closest at his feet, listening with round eyes. Laughter ripples gently when the tale is funny, especially at Loki's mischief or Thor's feigned surprise, and quiet gasps or sighs are heard when he describes something awe-inspiring. These stories, told and retold every Yule, are cultural glue. In the darkest time, they remind everyone of who they are in the grand narrative of the world that carries on. Some Yule nights, when the fire is low and only the bravest or most curious remain awake, people might step outside under the stars. The northern lights, rare but breathtaking, could be shimmering on the horizon like wisps of green and pink. The watchers pull their cloaks tighter against the biting cold and gaze upward. They remember the tales that these lights might be the armor of the Valkyries, flashing as they ride the sky, or the glow of Bifrost high above. Perhaps someone murmurs, the All-Father's host rides tonight, half in jest, half in reverence. It's a comforting thought. Even in the deepest dark, the gods and their chosen are at work overhead. Then, with noses numbing and hearts full, they retreat back inside, where the embers promise warmth until dawn. At last, the Yule night waned. One by one, the neighbors who had joined the feast pulled on their fur cloaks and stepped back out into the starlit cold, lanterns bobbing as they made their way home. They departed with full bellies and lighter hearts, each carrying a spark of the communal warmth back to their own hearths. Footprints crisscrossed the fresh snow between farmsteads that night, a comforting web of connection in the dark. Winter's hardest weeks still lay ahead, but no one would face them alone. The memory of shared ale and laughter, of songs and blessings exchanged, would be a glowing ember in every household, rekindled whenever spirits waned. And so the community's resolve to endure was reaffirmed, carrying them all gently toward the promise of spring. In this way, Yule was both a celebration and a reaffirmation. It aligned with the cosmic cycle of the sun's rebirth. When the sun rose a fraction earlier in the days after solstice, they felt their prayers and sacrifices vindicated. They would have broken the back of winter and look forward now to the slow return of life. The hardships of the past year, the losses and worries, were given closure in the toasts and offerings. And as they stepped into the new year, they did so together, strengthened by kinship and faith. Yule was the grandest of their yearly observances, but not the only one. In the spring, as the ice melted and first green shoots peeked through the soil, they held celebrations to honor the earth's awakening. At Volblot, spring sacrifice, farmers would lead their plow oxen for the first furrow and pour ale into the furrow, giving back to the land before taking from it once more. They might sacrifice a cock or a lamb to Freyja, the divine twins of fertility, asking for gentle rains and sun and dew measure. Women would decorate the halls with fresh birch twigs and early wildflowers, bringing the scent of new growth indoors. There was joy and relief in those gatherings. The long winter was over, and life was visibly returning. Come summer, around the time of the midsummer solstice, when daylight reigned almost all hours, they lit bonfires on hilltops or near the coast. Flames leapt high into the clear evening that never fully darkened. Folk would dance slowly or simply sit and talk through the white nights. They celebrated Sunna, the sun goddess, in her full glory, and sometimes floated wreaths of flowers on rivers or lakes as offerings to the water spirits, thanking them for the season's warmth and asking that the growing crops be protected. Children played games chasing each other around the bonfire, their laughter a testament to the vitality of the season. Though midsummer lacked the drama of Yule, it was no less meaningful, a yearly peak of light, acknowledged with gratitude and a touch of wistfulness, knowing that after the peak the days would shorten again. In the autumn, after harvest, another blot was customary, the Vetna tree, or Winter Night's Festival. As they stored away the last sheaves of barley and hung the slaughtered meat to cure, they thanked the gods, especially Freyja, for the bounty. They also remembered the ancestral spirits, the Disir. At this time, it was said these guardian female spirits, perhaps the souls of grandmothers past, had a hand in the fertility of the fields and the protection of the clan. Families might hold a smaller feast at home, setting a place at the table for the unseen guests. A portion of porridge or beer might be left on the doorstep at night as an offering to wandering spirits or house elves, ensuring they stayed friendly over the coming cold months. Thus, through each turn of the year, the Norse people kept rhythm with the world's natural cadence. These communal observances were not wild revels or moralized sermons. They were like gentle pulses of a heartbeat, reassuring and regular. They gave shape to time and lent a sense of cooperative purpose to entire villages and regions. When they slaughtered and sacrificed, it was done as a reciprocal act, life given to secure life's continuance. When they feasted and toasted, it was not only for pleasure, but to bind everyone in shared hope and gratitude. And when they lit fires in the dark or danced under the sun, they were expressing their harmony with the grand cosmic dance of day and night, summer and winter, creation and destruction. Each festival was, in a sense, a small rehearsal for greater events, a promise that even at the edge of despair or darkness, they would gather, light candles against the void, speak sacred words, and hold one another up through whatever may come. As the Viking Age drew on, a new faith slowly dawned in the north: Christianity, the religion of the White Christ. Its arrival was not a single moment of revelation, but a gradual mingling and eventual overtaking, like the slow brightening of the sky before sunrise. For generations, Norse traders and settlers had encountered Christian monks, priests, and kings in other lands. At first, these were just foreign curiosities, people who worshipped a single god and carried painted icons of a sorrowful man on a cross. But over time, especially by the late 900s, this new faith took root in Scandinavian soil as well. One can imagine a small village in, say, early 1000s Norway. A messenger comes from the king, proclaiming that all must be baptized into Christianity, for the king himself has taken the new faith and pledged to abandon the old gods. The villagers listen respectfully, perhaps anxiously. They've heard of harsh penalties in other districts for those who refuse. Some may grumble in private, others may shrug. After all, why not honor another powerful god, especially if it allows peace with the king and trading partners? Many likely comply outwardly, while keeping their old beliefs quietly in their hearts. They walk to the riverbank, where a foreign priest in a white robe intones Latin prayers and pours cold water over their heads in baptism. The priest tells them their souls are now safe in Christ, that they need not fear the pagan demons or Ragnarok's doom if they remain true to the church. The people nod, accepting the words politely. They do feel a certain comfort in the promise of heaven and an ultimate triumph of good over evil. It sounds like an ending happier than Ragnarok, to be sure. In Iceland, for example, around the year 1000, the decision to convert was made at the National Assembly, all thing by consensus. The pagan law speaker, tasked with resolving the religious divide, declared that while all Icelanders would accept baptism and Christianity as the official faith, they could continue certain pagan practices in private. Old customs like eating horse meat or quietly worshiping at certain sacred sites were tolerated for a time. This compromise soothed tensions and allowed people to adapt at a gentle pace. No blood was shed, and community unity was preserved. Over the years, the public rites to Odin or Thor simply became less frequent as churches and crosses multiplied, but without the trauma of violent suppression. It is said that the law speaker who made this decision, himself a pagan, went home after the assembly and symbolically cast his statues of the Norse gods into a waterfall, not in anger, but as a way of trusting that this was the right course for his people, letting the old gods go with respect. Perhaps the most profound change Christianity brought was a shift in how people imagined the ultimate future. The concept of Ragnarok itself began to transform in their minds. Christian teaching spoke of a different end time, the biblical apocalypse and last judgment, where Christ returns in glory to vanquish Satan and establish a heavenly kingdom. For a Norse peasant hearing this, it might sound like a more hopeful twist on the familiar tale of World's End. Instead of all gods perishing and darkness prevailing, even if only temporarily, the Christian story promised that the true God would overcome evil and create an everlasting paradise. Some of the poets of the time, even those raised on pagan lore, found themselves blending the narratives. One late skald might imagine that the fires and quakes of Ragnarok were akin to the trials before Judgment Day, and that perhaps after Surtur's flames died, it was not just a new earth, but God's eternal heaven that awaited. Indeed, an Icelandic monk writing down the old myths in the 13th century, long after the Vikings were at their height, and so after Scandinavia converted to Christianity, Snorri Sturluson himself was a Christian, cannot help but infuse a tone of Christian moral order into them, framing the pagan gods almost as heroic, but doomed mortals who didn't know the one true God. For common folks, these theological musings mattered less than practical life. What they experienced was that year by year, the old ways receded. The grandsons and granddaughters grew up baptized and taught to pray to Jesus and Mary. The carving of runes and the singing of pagan chants were discouraged by the new clergy, some of whom were native sons who had taken holy orders. The annual Yule feast persisted, but now it was said to honor the birth of Christ rather than Odin's wild hunt or Freyja's blessings, though truthfully, around the fire the celebrations looked much the same. They still lit candles and shared ale. Only now there might be a brief reading from the Gospels amidst the toasts. Old habits were hard to extinguish. People might still hide a straw Yule goat in the house as a prank, recalling Thor's goats, or leave a sheaf of grain out on Christmas Eve for Odin's horse, or perhaps now they'd say it's for St. Nicholas's steed. Over time, the stories blended into new forms. Some elders in the mid-1000s undoubtedly felt a pang of melancholy. Imagine an aged grandmother who in her youth witnessed a vulva's prophecy, who grew up venerating Thor and Freyja, now watching her great-grandchildren learn the Latin alphabet and build a little wooden church where once a small Hof temple stood. She might not resist. Many converts found genuine solace in Christianity's message of mercy and eternal life, but she might quietly share the old tales when the priest wasn't around. In a corner of the hearth while carding wool, she tells the wide-eyed kids about Odin riding Sleipnir, or how the world was shaped from Ymir's body, not as gospel truth anymore, but as cultural memory, how our ancestors used to explain things. The children listen with delight, treating the Norse gods perhaps like beloved characters in a fable, even as they also learn about Christ and the saints. In this manner, the myths lived on, softened into stories rather than active faith. The clash of pagan and Christian beliefs could sometimes cause friction. A devout Christian might scold neighbors for leaving offerings for land spirits, and some fervent pagans saw the abandonment of the old gods as a betrayal. But overall, the transition in many places was gradual and relatively gentle. People often hedged their bets for a while. A 10th century farmer in Sweden might have both a hammer amulet and a cross on the same necklace, or a Viking war leader might accept baptism in the new lands he conquered, but still pray to Odin before battle. Even their everyday language preserved the memory of the old gods. The names of the days bore them quietly onward. They still spoke of Tyr's Day, Tuesday, Odin's Day, Wednesday, Thor's Day, Thursday, and Freyja's Day, Friday, habits of speech that no priest could uproot, nor likely wanted to, for they were ingrained in how people told time. Thus, even as they knelt at church on a Wednesday, somewhere in the back of their minds was the faint recollection that this was once Odin's Day. The old and new coexisted in such subtle ways. Eventually, the Norse gods receded into legend fully. The world did not end in their time. No Fimbul winter blanketed the earth in their generation. Instead, the pagan world itself came to an end, in a sense, as the North embraced a new spiritual order. But the acceptance of one ending gave birth to new understandings. The sagas were written down by Christian scribes, preserving the memory of the old beliefs so that they were not truly lost. And in those sagas, one can almost feel the reverence for the ancestors' way of life, even as the new authors frame it as the past overtaken by the true faith. For the purposes of our sleepy reflection, we can see this as another lesson in cycles. The Norse had anticipated an end of all things, but what came was an end of an era. Their civilization's beliefs underwent a transformation, a kind of miniature Ragnarok, followed by rebirth in a different form. The values that sustained them, bravery, honor, community, survived the shift, finding new expression under Christianity, and their resignation to fate merged with Christian providence, still teaching them to meet whatever end with trust in a larger plan. The last generation to personally remember the pagan rites would have felt both sadness and perhaps relief. Sadness to see the beloved gods of their childhood relegated to story. Relief, perhaps, that the fear of Ragnarok's doom was tempered now by a hope of heavenly eternity beyond a single cataclysm. On a quiet evening around year 1100, you might find an elderly man humming an old tune of Odin and Thor, while his grandson kneels in prayer at a simple wooden altar with a cross. The old man doesn't interfere. He simply smiles at the continuity of devotion, knowing that though the names have changed, the human search for meaning and comfort in the face of the unknown carries on. He too has made his peace with the new faith, but in his heart, the wisdom of the old ways still glows like the last coals of a fire at dawn. He will tell the boy those old tales as bedtime stories, not to sow confusion, but to pass on a heritage of imagination and resilience. And the boy, falling asleep, will carry both the cross and the hammer in his cultural soul. In time, the hammer will fade, but it will never disappear completely. It will lie dormant, like a seed in winter, waiting in the rich soil of folklore and story. So the twilight of the Norse pagan world was a long sunset that gave way to a new day, endings blending into beginnings, as always. For the Norse, who so believed in cycles, perhaps this was fitting. They weathered the end of their old world quietly, just as they weathered winter storms, with patience, community, and the faith that spring would come. The outward form of their preparations changed to Christian prayers and sacraments, but beneath that, the same steady hearts beat, full of humility before the divine and determination to live well until whatever end God ordained. Now our journey through that long-ago world draws to a quiet close. The images of snowy farms, flickering hall fires, and misty burial mounds begin to blur and fade, like old runes being gently worn smooth by time. We leave the Norse folk where they belong, in peace, beneath the same sky we sleep under. Their fears and preparations, their hopes and beliefs, all mingle now with the night breeze. Think once more of the simple family we first imagined, huddled by their hearth in the dim firelight. The hour is late. The children have long fallen asleep, dreams guided perhaps by faint recollections of grandmother's stories. The mother has set aside her mending, and the father's head nods in drowsy reflection. One by one they drift off to their beds, pulling warm wool blankets over themselves against the cold. Outside, the wind has settled. The stars glimmer through cracks in the smoke hole, and the embers on the hearth settle into a soft glow, like a small galaxy of red stars in the ash. In that hush, what remains is a sense of enduring calm. The world may end tomorrow, or 1,000 years from now, but tonight all is well in their little corner of Midgard. They have done what they can in life for today, and they leave the rest to fate. Whatever comes, be it a winter storm or the far-off fires of Ragnarok, will be met as part of the natural course of things. And if nothing spectacular comes, well, tomorrow will bring its own sunrise, chores, laughter, and maybe a new story to tell by the next night's fire. Let us leave them in this gentle state of readiness and contentment. As the last ember finally winks out and darkness fills the hall, There is no fear, only the quiet breathing of a family at rest. In their minds, perhaps a lullaby or an old prayer lingers. Words about fate and trust, about living with honor and hope. Those words melt into silence as sleep takes them. We too can carry a bit of their calm courage with us as we drift into our own sleep. The past with all its voices has been whispering to us tonight, not with calls to battle or alarms, but with a soothing reminder that people have always faced uncertainty with hearts full of stories and faith. The Norse waited for Ragnarok in the most humane way, by cherishing each other, by tending their fires against the dark, by singing of what was and what may be, and by not yielding to despair. In the end, perhaps that is the best any of us can do. Sleep well, under the same stars that watched over our Norse friends. May your dreams be peaceful, and your heart be brave. For now, let the gentle darkness cradle you, just as it cradled those ancient souls under the northern sky. And when the dawn eventually peeks in, may it find you rested and quietly hopeful, as if touched by the enduring spirit of those who waited so long ago for the world to renew itself once more. Good night, sweet dreams.